Well, that is that. The end of the road has come for the SF-25 as there will be no more major upgrades for the rest of the season. That was confirmed by Fred Vaseurr after the checkered flag had fallen at last weekend's Belgium Grand Prix. So, a project full of failure without a shadow of a doubt that never really got its feet off the ground with regards to having any sort of credible title challenge or even really putting up a fight for podiums on a consistent basis. And again, it is another whole regulation cycle from which Ferrari have had a disastrous spell. Now, Fred Vasseur also did state that there will be specific kind of targeted, I don't know whether you can call them upgrades or parts bought for other racetracks across the 25 season. I can think of a few to go off the top of my head. Namely, in Monza, they will no doubt have the skinny rear ring from 2024, where they were highly successful, with Charles Leclerc taking the race victory last year. But of course, it does spell the end for a pretty disastrous car, and I'm sure all Ferrari fans likewise have had enough basically of the car, and really they cannot wait, I suppose, for 2026 to roll on, and at least they can now have the rest of the year where they have a lot of hopium, with regards to what Ferrari can produce with the 2026 regs. But again, knowing Ferrari's recent track history and track record, I do not hold out hope that they're going to get things correct for the start of this new era. Now, I'm sure one of the big questions will be, was the front suspension the majority of the issue with regards to the concept for the SF-25 and why it's been a total failure? Well, I don't think we, outside of Ferrari, have enough, I would say, statistical data to suggest that. Ferrari, of course, have all of the data in-house where they've probably tested out two versions of the SF-25, one with the pull rod front suspension and one with the push rod. Now, it's quite clear Ferrari saw a lot more development room and scope with regard in switching from push to pull rod on the front suspension layout. Now, what happened is probably they had unforeseen issues with that in other areas of the car, and that change from a push to pull has then meant they've had to work far more on other issues that we've quite understandably seen throughout the 25 season, and it's meant that they really never got a foothold in place. Now, we could only speculate as well what would have happened if they'd stuck with the pushrod layout and made all the other changes that they had. Would we have seen the plank issue? Would we have seen the ride height issues with the race pace of being better, with qualifying pace of being better? These are tangibles that we really can never get any evidence one way or the other. The only way we would is if Ferrari went and designed a new SF-25 sticking to last year's concept with the pushrod front layout and see what would have happened. And that is something we're just never going to know, and it is no point really dwelling on that either. Now, it is better for Ferrari as an organization to just look to the future with regarding what they can do for 26 and beyond. Now, where does this leave both drivers in Hamilton and Leclerc for the rest of the season? Well, it's going to leave them somewhat in a status quo sort of standpoint. They're going to be where they are. They may go back a little bit. They may go forwards a little bit, depending on the sort of racetracks that Formula One tend to go to now for the remainder of the year. But don't expect any race victories. I think that is pretty much sailed. They have no chance in hell of doing that. Podiums are the best bet we can expect from Ferrari. And really, it is such a shame that their season has kind of fallen down into this negativity spiral with regards to how they produce cars, how they develop cars in season, the pit rule, the decisions they make at a race weekend. There is numerous occasions from which we've seen awful decisions made by the team. So I think Ferrari now will find themselves kind of chasing podium every weekend to see whether they can set the car up correctly, whether the rear suspension they can find more out of it, which I think, for example, this particular weekend in Hungary coming up, that is what the rear suspension was all about. It was more about these sorts of circuits at Hungary rather than the ones we just were at in Spa, for example. And I don't really know what to say with regards to Ferrari. I don't really think there's going to need to be much more videos made with regards to the SF-25. It is a dead end. The team have pretty much given up, particularly when you consider the fact of there being that major technical regulation change for 2026 right around the corner. They need to make sure everything is fully focused on that. They're using all of the wind tunnel runs, all of the CFD runs that they have available to them to go full on that 26 model that they have in-house at Maranello. And hopefully for their sake now, they can just knuckle down, find some extra performance, as I'm sure they will do, kind of wind tunnel run in, wind tunnel run out, and all of those things week in and week out. I think with the technical regs as they are for 26, there is always going to be performance gains every weekend, or every week I should say rather, when you're running your latest model in that wind tunnel in CFD. And I think Ferrari will have a lot of hope that they can do something a little bit different for 26, hit it out of the ballpark, get the concepts right. If their engine is not perhaps the best engine on the grid, at least have it within a respectable ballpark that they can maybe make in-season changes, or for next season where it's not too big of a deficit, such as the likes of which Red Bull had to contend with at the start of the 2014 hybrid era. That car was really good aerodynamically, but the engine, the Renault engine they had in the back of it, was absolutely atrocious. It never gave them a chance in hell with a kind of standard weekend in the sport back in 2014 to challenge Mercedes for a victory. It was only when Mercedes ran into trouble, Red Bull were there to pick up the pieces, and that is something you have to hope Ferrari do not have when it comes to their bloody engine, because Lord only knows what they have with regards to the current Ferrari engine for next season. But from what I've gathered and what I've heard and read even, it seems like their engine isn't that bad. It seems like it is going to be a little bit behind that of Mercedes, but not in the realms of disaster that Renault had in the beginning of this hybrid era in 2014. So that should leave them with hope that if they have a little engine deficit, the aero, the car that they produce, the chassis, will be better than that of Merck's, and then they can fight from that particular aspect of things. And if they can, maybe they have a flipping title challenge on their hands heading into 26. But on historical data and current form, I hardly believe that is going to be the case for Ferrari for 2026. But only time will tell.